Welcome to episode 4 of the Into the Indies podcast. Today's guest is the creator of 2 indie games that managed to actually make me cry. She is also known online as indie dev Kinmoku, Lucy Blundell. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
First of all, I would like to ask you, when did you first thought that you'd like to try out to be a developer of video games?
Yeah, so I kind of studied art and animation at university, and I graduated during the recession in 2008, 2009. So I was struggling to get a job for a while, but I landed a role as a graphic designer at Chilingo, who were the publisher of the original Angry Birds and Cut the Rope games on iPhone. And that was really cool because I got to see a lot of indie games, like mobile ones that came in, and I got to play them and support them and do the graphic design stuff. So I was designing things like app store icons, screenshots, advertisements. Sometimes they were print things, and sometimes like giveaway items, things like that. And I did that for just about 5 years. And I think at that point, I wanted to do something different. I didn't have much luck trying to find a different role. So I just I'd saved up enough money to just be like, right, I'm going to design my own games. Like, I believe in myself. I've learned a lot from this job. I've seen a lot of indie games succeed and fail. And I felt really confident to kind of do it myself. So yeah, I've been an indie dev now for 11 years, which is wild.
Yeah, especially in an industry where getting to double digits is not easy at all.
Yeah, and it's just quite rare as well. Like, even if you kind of do succeed, you can burn out, so it's a tricky industry for sure.
Yeah. Getting back a bit before you first started in the industry at all, was there any specific video game you played or something that made you think, okay, that's something I would like to create?
Yeah, so I think I've been playing games since I can remember, 3 or 4 years old. My older brother loved video games, so I watched him play and then I played them. But I think the game that really changed me was Final Fantasy VII. And I played that when I was about 11 years old. And I think it was that moment I didn't know I could make games back then, but it made me want to kind of write stories and, work in a creative field. For a while, I thought I would maybe become a comic artist or an illustrator or something like that. But then, a few years later, I played Katawa Shoujo, which is a visual novel about, it's like a dating sim, about these disabled characters. And I actually found it really nice. And it was a Renpai game. So that was the first kind of Renpai game I saw and played. And I thought oh, this is quite simple. And it combines art and storytelling, which were the things that I really like to do. So yeah, at that point I was like, okay, I think I can make my own visual novel. But yeah, I've always kind of loved art, animation, and video games equally. So I was happy to end up in any of those fields, really.
Yeah, and I was expecting to see what visual novel you would say it would be the one, because for anybody who has played One Night Stand and Videoverse, the games that we're gonna mostly talk about, they are really not visual novels per se, but visual novelly in spirit. And as you said, tackle both storytelling and art at the same time. And I was expecting you to say some type of visual novel for sure.
Yeah.
And did you try at all at that early stage to create something already, or did that have to wait until you started working on One Night Stand for something truly your own?
Yeah. So I think like when I was like a teenager, so after I played Final Fantasy VII, I was kind of messing around with kind of learning digital art. Um, I did actually try and make my own RPG when I was still quite young with RPG Maker.
Who hasn't?
Um, and I didn't finish it. It was I realized like wow, it takes a lot of work to make a full game on your own, and I thought oh I'll never be able to do that, which is funny because I ended up doing it. Um, but yeah, like it was only really after university I spent a lot of time like focusing on my studies. um then I got my job. It was only really towards the last couple of years when whilst I was at Chilingo, like I was I wanted to move on and get into game development, and I started to teach myself Ren'Py. So I just tried making some really simple visual novels to start with before One Night Stand. um and they were not really like games. They were just kind of like training, like tests, and like just trying to like practice really. um and then I think I tried to start my first game, which was called Love IRL, which I still have, but I haven't finished it or released it, which is quite a common thing with me. Like I only have two released games. um but yeah, like I was working on like Love IRL, and I think I spent like just over a year on that. And my issue is that I usually make some or aim to make something that's just a bit too big. And because I'm doing it on my own mostly, that's it's difficult. So that was when I saw the NaNoWriMo Game Jam event, which is like a 1 month visual novel game jam. And I decided to make One Night Stand because I think game jams can be really good for this, that you can just finish a game and get it done. And that really helped me, like, actually, finish and release something. So One Night Stand is like my first proper finished game. But there's a lot of unfinished things before then.
Will somebody who actually checks like a niche or something find any Kinmoku micro games or unfinished games, or is everything on your private folders and that's it?
Yeah, it's all private. And that's something that I'm quite ashamed of, a lot of my unfinished things. Um, I think a lot of artists are like that. Like you just see some things that you made when you were younger and you're like, ugh, like I'm glad no one's seen that. Um, but there are some of the unfinished ones that I would like to return to at some point and like polish up and actually finish. But it's always about kind of budget or marketability, and just making kind of the right financial decisions, I guess.
Yeah, I really feel you on the unfinished projects part. Like my projects folder is filled with whatever
Yeah.
that I haven't touched for. Some of them I haven't touched for, I think, 15 to 20 years now, and
Oh
are still
wow, that
waiting.
sounds like me.
Yeah, and when you spoke about RPG Maker, that brought back memories. Like middle school, I tried RPG Maker XP for at
Mm.
some point, and like I created one or two levels, and
Oh,
uh, I had a CD made of those two levels and passed it around a
nice.
couple friends at school. And they were like, yeah,
Oh,
okay, is there anything else outside those two levels? And I never
that's
actually
really
made
nice.
anything. Yeah. It's always fun to create some stuff, even for your own sake.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it just helps you learn and appreciate the process a bit more as well.
Exactly. So, to start a bit on One Night Stand, this was released in 2016, and from what you said, it was a game jam game then, at first?
So the kind of first version of it was, and it got so popular that I decided to make it into like a full game. So I spent like another like another 6 months on it, and then released it on Steam for sale.
And let's a bit from behind the scenes perspective. How would you say the final version differed from the original Game Jam version? What did you add on those 6 months?
So the original version, like I say, it was my first release game, so I hadn't really playtested it, and it was full of bugs. So fixing those was the biggest thing. Then it had the original version only had 6 endings, so I ended up adding another 6 because I had like so many other ideas that I just couldn't fit into the game jam time. It also had like better animations, so there was just more detail to the character. There were more animations in general. Things like she makes you a coffee. In the original one, you didn't see a coffee. She didn't hand you anything. So there were things like that. I think there were like more items added as well. Achievements were added. The gallery was added. Like hints on how to get the endings. I think there was like extra songs. Yeah, it just made it into like an actual like kind of product. Because before then it was just a bit of it was just kind of thrown together. But like I was really proud of getting it done in the time that I did. I think it was just under 4 weeks. And then I just uploaded it to itch.io. And then I went away on holiday immediately after. And then whilst I was away, it just kind of exploded and these YouTubers started playing it. And then whilst I was on holiday, I was like, okay, when I get back, I have to make this into a proper game.
Yeah, I find it really funny about all of us creative people who, after we really sit down and work on something to finish it and get it out, then immediately go on vacations and just leave everything to their fate. Okay, it's done. Bye.
It's the best way to do it, I think. Because even if it doesn't go well and no one played it and no one cared, at least you had a nice holiday and you rested.
Yeah. I want to chat a bit about your creative process of One Night Stand, because what really intrigued me about that game was that you opted for a really small story, really condensed story, but with a lot of actual choice making and replayability. So why did you choose that? Especially because after the fact, I'm trying to compare it a bit with Videoverse, for example, which was more, while it had its own unique takes on how a visual novel could be in a different, more experimental version, Videoverse was more structured, more, okay, this is a story we're telling, there are choices, but it has a specific beginning, middle, and end. But in One Night Stand, you went all the way around like 6 endings or even more distinct endings. Like she can throw you out, you can be friends, or you can start a relationship, stuff like that. So why did you opt for this type of storytelling?
Yeah, I think what I came up with first was the concept. And I knew like for a game jam, it needed to be something small. So I was thinking like just set in one room. But how do you make one room exciting? So I started writing it and it's like, oh, there could be lots of different outcomes here. There's also in that situation a lot of emotions, a lot of awkward emotions in particular. And you might want to run away or escape or get out of the situation. So that felt like, well, that's an ending or two, depending on how you do it. Do you fail at that attempt? There's another ending. And it just kind of started coming from there, like, oh, this could go lots of different ways. And, even there were even some ideas that I had that never made it into the final game either. I had an idea of her like, oh, you could find the window at the side and jump out and go out that way
That would be
instead.
funny.
Yeah. But I was like, I had to reel it in. Like, this is just getting a bit silly, really. So I think like with One Night Stand, it was mostly because it was a game jam, so it had to be small. But you could have the replayability, and the idea that I had wasn't so much that players would do every single ending, unless they're like completionists. It was more that everyone that played it, like it could be kind of a party game. Like you could sit around and play it with your friends, and each person would do it differently. Almost like, I guess, I used to quite like personality tests and things when I was younger. And, people being told like they're a certain type of person or a different personality. Like I used to see like players at events with One Night Stand, and everyone would play it like differently. Some people were really kind and polite, and they wouldn't like snoop or look through her stuff. Like they really took the morals, like, oh, I'm not going to look in her wallet. I'm not going to look at her laptop. I'm just going to be good and just only look at things that are actually visible. And I'm going to try and get to know her. And other people are like, I don't care who she is. I think she's really rude. I'm going to be mean. I'm going to take a photograph of her. I'm going to like brag to my friends. It was kind of just, oh, so if you give the player all these different choices, you're going to end up with a lot of different outcomes. And I think that was it, really. Whereas Videoverse, I very much had one kind of particular story that I wanted to tell. And the focus for Videoverse was completely different.
I was gonna comment on why did you believe this is a good game for parties, but then when you brought up the personality tests, yeah, okay, it makes way more sense now to me.
And I think that's kind of maybe why it worked so well as like a streaming game or like a YouTube game, because different YouTubers would do different things. And I think it started, there was even someone made a fan animation of Jacksepticeye and Markiplier, of them, like clips from both of them playing One Night Stand. They like put them together and they did different things, and it just kind of revealed a lot about who was playing the game. And I think audiences who were, people who were watching them play really liked that.
That actually is a good segue to my next question.
Okay.
You mentioned Markiplier and Jacksepticeye, two really big YouTubers, really well known. My first experience with One Night Stand was when I read about it on PC Gamer magazine. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting game. I want to try it out. How do you take your game being mentioned in such a way, like in such big publications, played by big streamers, really getting out?
It was honestly quite a shock at first, especially because like I'm a little bit older. I didn't really watch YouTubers or anything. So I was trying to like understand a lot of, what's Let's Playing about. And, remember this was like 10 years ago now. So it was very much like, what is this? Like, oh, people like watching people play games. Like, oh, they played mine. Who are they? And it's like, wow, they've got like millions of viewers. So yeah, it was really shocking. I must admit, I did find it quite stressful at first, like seeing all those eyes on it, because I didn't expect it. But over time, like, you just learn to, like, people are just going to have fun watching the streamers. It's less about the game, I think. And they're just going to enjoy that. And maybe they'll download your game and check it out for themselves. But yeah, it's strange. I mean, I still sometimes get like an uptick in sales, for example, on One Night Stand, and I'll Google like, well, why was that? And it's like, oh, some other streamer or someone has covered it, even all these years later, it's just always like ticking along. It's a very strange one.
It's legacy, you could say. It's a legacy of a good game.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those. It won't really age, I guess. Like it just, even the art style, because it's not like 3D graphics, or it just kind of always
really
looks kind of
beautiful.
nice. Yeah.
And I would argue also its theme, like in Videoverse, which we'll discuss a bit later in this podcast, is not dated, but it calls out to a specific demographic, a specific period in human history. While One Night Stand, you could argue it's a tale as old as time, you could say.
Yeah, that's true.
It's about human interaction. Okay. So you finished One Night Stand 2016. Videoverse came out in 2023. So when did you first start working on the idea of Videoverse?
Yeah, so I started working on it in 2020. So that's quite a few years later. So what happened was with One Night Stand, I then wanted to port it to consoles. So I spent a few years trying to do that and work with the porter. I actually was working with someone else originally before Ratalaika Games, who ported it, but it didn't work out. So then I went to Ratalaika Games. They helped me port it. And I learned a lot about like porting Renpai games, specifically like the controls, because it's, a PC engine, really. So that took quite a bit of time. And then I started working on a game that I didn't finish, which was, the working title was called Memories. Now, it was a bit of a kind of semi-autobiographical game. And I worked on it for a couple of years, but the reason why I kind of stopped, a big reason was like things in my life had changed. I'd become disabled, and my perspective on things had just changed. And then, like a year later, we had the global pandemic. And I remember, like, Memories was a bit of a serious game. It was a bit dark. And I just didn't, at this point, I just didn't want to really work on something like that anymore. I also thought the world maybe needed something a little bit brighter, a bit more hopeful, kind of bittersweet. So that was when, it was around April or May in 2020, I thought, right, I'm going to make Videoverse. And it's going to be this, story of an online system. And I'd already had like mechanics in Memories, like the drawing mechanic. That was in Memories that kind of inspired Videoverse, because I thought it looked like Miiverse drawings. So there were like parts of like Memories that went into Videoverse. Even some of the characters and feudal fantasy, for example, is a thing that came from Memories. So it wasn't like all wasted work or anything. But yeah, like that's when it started. And then it was in development for just over 3 years before I released it in 2023. And I didn't expect it to take that long, but it has it's not a typical Renpai game. And it has a very complex kind of messaging system, which did cause quite a lot of headaches. But yeah, it just was a game that started growing and growing, and I'm really pleased with the kind of final version of the game.
So you could say that Videoverse is kind of the spiritual successor of the Memories game in some way?
Yeah, a little bit for sure. Like it's like Memories was more kind of semi-autobiographical, but that, that kind of stuff didn't really make it into Videoverse, but the characters and some of the world around it did. So yeah, there were like artwork and characters and things that I'd already kind of done, which made like developing Videoverse just that little bit quicker. And I think it also made it feel richer. Like these characters and games and things that they're talking about have existed for a long time, at least in my world.
Yeah. That's interesting, though, that you say that the Memories game is semi-autobiographical, because one of the questions I would have for you about Videoverse is that Videoverse, to me, especially after I did some research to prepare for the review originally and this interview, Videoverse appears to me a bit autobiographical as well in several aspects. Like the protagonist being a British who lives in Germany, for example, or disability, as you said, being a theme of the game in general, one of the themes. And also the era of video gaming and online discourse.
Yeah.
Is that something you actually thought about when you were writing the story and themes, or did it just come naturally?
Yeah, I think with Videoverse, it wasn't an intentional, like semi-autobiographical thing, but it was meant to be very kind of relatable and close to my heart, I guess. It was going to reveal a lot of feelings that I had had about the internet, about video games, about disability. It was going to be quite close to me, but not really. It's not really about me or a character like me. The characters are very much themselves, but in the case of Emmett, he was written from a familiar point of view. So he's half German and half English, whereas I'm completely English, but I live in Germany. So it felt like I could write this kind of character, and a big reason for doing that was that I had to think, like, why are all these users online? And he's online because he feels a bit lonely. He wants to talk to like English people because that's where he lived when he was younger. And he wants to like reconnect with people. So that's why he goes online. And every character kind of has their reason for being there. And yeah, it felt like also just a little bit more interesting that I could throw in some of the things that I've experienced living here in Germany, like some of the Emmett's favorite foods, for example. There's something called grün sauce, which a lot of players are like, "What the heck is that?" Which is a specific Frankfurt dish. So yeah, it just made it a little bit more realistic and richer, really. But it was never a deliberate intention to make it like my life. It's just, I just think your writing is maybe a bit more interesting when you write what you know a lot about.
Yeah, I understand. Though I have to say, when you started mentioning earlier about how you first played, like, for example, Final Fantasy VII from your older brother, I was like, oh, okay, I remember something like that from Videoverse. Of course, I'm not insinuating it was 100%, but 100% autobiographical, but, whether you got some of the ideas or feelings from that period of your life.
Oh yeah, for sure. Then it was a lot easier for me to write kind of the emotions behind it, like how much Emmett really loved the game and Vivi loved drawing fan art of her favorite characters, and they're all very real feelings that I've had, especially when I was a teenager.
Yeah. Going a bit more into the mechanics of Videoverse, what was the thinking behind the interactive ability with the online Miiverse-like feature of the game? Because it seems to me like a completely different thing from what you would expect from, in air quotes, by the book visual novel.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer this one. I think, as I mentioned, the original idea came from the drawing mechanic. And it was like this black and white pixel drawing. And then I thought that looks like Miiverse. And, Miiverse drawings, visual novels. I started to think like, what about like a romance game in Miiverse or something like that? And I'd been playing a lot of kind of OS simulator games. So Hypnospace Outlaw, lostmemories.net.
Oh, I need to try those out. They've
Yeah,
been in my
really,
list
really
for
good.
years.
Oh, yeah, you've got to play. One thing though, like, there was a few others, like Do Not Feed the Monkeys, Stay, Emily is Away. And some of them are a little bit more emotional. But generally, I felt a little bit like disappointed that there wasn't really much of a story told. It's usually a bit more of a mystery or a bit more of a policing, like, oh, you've got to delete like bad comments or just even just going down the horror path with these things. And I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to tell a story of how people connect online, really, and just have a nice, heartwarming kind of friendship or a romance if you decide to play it that way. And telling it through this system, it just made it feel a bit more real and immersive. I knew Renpai could do it at a push, and it was quite a push to get it to do it. But yeah, it was a nice challenge, and I think I did work with a programmer as well called Depeche, who really helped me build the Videoverse system. And then I would say like, oh, I need it to do this certain thing. Like in the DMs, you can send a drawing to your friend, like coming up with all these little things, and he would like implement it so I could then code it in myself and add these little things. So yeah, it was a big challenge, but I do think it made it very immersive, and I'm interested maybe of making a similar game in future, although that's not like planned or anything. But yeah, I think telling emotional stories through like computer interfaces is quite novel and effective. Yeah.
It was definitely effective for sure. I found myself a lot of times remembering actually I'm not as old as you, pardon my language, but I was around in the early MSN days and chat group days, and especially since I'm in Greece, I'm Greek, I didn't have access to all of this technology at the same time as Northern Europe. They came to us in like 5 years later or stuff like that.
Okay.
So it was always a bit later at the time scheduling. But I remember those days. So playing Videoverse, I directly got back to the time when I was chatting with my friends in MSN or had all those discussions, and many tears were shed, let's just say that.
Well, it was the same for me, really, because I think I became a bit obsessed with the internet when I was around 11 or 12. It was basically after finishing Final Fantasy VII and finding forums online to talk about the game. And then it became other things like anime. And eventually, like years later, it was World of Warcraft. And I used to get really sad and emotional, like when friends would leave or guilds would close down, or in one case, even the server closed at one point and we all had to move to another one. And it was just really, really sad. And I don't think a lot of people really talk about that particular kind of grief, like losing people online. So yeah, I wanted to talk about it, I guess.
I think that might be because people of our generation remember when internet wasn't a thing. So we really valued when we first had access to, first of all, our friends online, our already in real life friends, especially if we traveled or were in different cities, and also getting connected with people abroad, which wasn't even something we would dream of before that time.
No.
While now it seems like it's the norm from birth.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is wild because, and that was something I did try and get across in Videoverse. Like, it's 2003. The internet is only just kind of getting into people's like homes at a wider scale. And people are like, wow, I'm chatting to someone who's in a different country, you know? I think Vivi even says that at some point. And it's quite nice remembering that, because nowadays we're so global. It's not really a big deal. We don't really think about it apart from time zones, you know.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was trying to mention previously. Like when I played the game and got to those comments of Eve, for example, I was like, yeah, okay. I realized I still remember like the 2-3 first global friends I made from the internet, even though we might have not talked for like 20 years or something. I still remember those first people. Oh yeah, I met this person in that, I don't know, browser game or what have you.
Yeah, for sure. I still think about the people that I used to know on DeviantArt and Neopets, the people that I would like message or like comment on their artwork or share things with. And yeah, I haven't spoken to them since I was like 16 or 17. And I just wonder, like, what are they doing now? You know, I hope they're okay.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Bringing it back a bit to the mechanics and design of Videoverse, did you find, compared to One Night Stand again, One Night Stand is more direct. You are a person, you do some actions, and you discuss, you have conversations with a second person who reacts to them. In Videoverse, though, you have that in the chat groups and the video messages you send with your direct contacts and friends, but you also have the forum aspect, with the likes, the deleting stuff, being a moderator, and that also having a story aspect of it. Like, I remember if I read the comments, I found out that one of my not camera ready friends might want to go to a relationship or stop playing or something like that. So I could have some discussions and affect the story in some capacity. Did you find that from a writing or designing perspective a bit difficult to implement, or how did you find this compared to a more straightforward interaction, let's say?
Yeah, it was difficult. The first thing that I wrote was like Emmett and Vivi's story, because that was the heart of what I wanted to talk about, and it was the friendship that meant the most to him. But then over time, I was like, well, he needs other friends. Like, this is an online platform. It's not just about two people. And this is another reason why the game took a lot longer to make than I thought, was that, you know, adding the extra characters and building the world took a lot longer than I thought it would, because I'd never done it before. So originally the forums were really different. They were for games instead. So in the final version, we see like, oh, there's the Feudal Fantasy forum. But originally, all the forums were about games that they played, very much like Miiverse was. So you'd have like a Super Mario forum and a Xenoblade forum, all this stuff. But I realized, like, well, the games that I'm talking about, they have to be fictional, you know, due to copyright. And if I had a bunch of fictional games, like, you wouldn't hang out in these forums because you don't have any reference of what these games are. We see cutscenes of Feudal Fantasy because that was the game that they bonded over, but I'd have to add them for all the other games. And it just seemed a bit like oh, if at that point, it's like, oh, maybe I should make all these other games, and you'd have a bunch of mini games. I was like, right, this this isn't gonna work. So that's why it changed to like a bit more of a forum base, like less like Nintendo's Miiverse and more like an old school forum where you had a general chat and an off-topic chat and the art corner, the fan art thing, and that like worked a lot better. So people could like chat about feudal fantasy, but they could also chat just about games in general or about their personal lives. And that made it a little bit more interesting. But I still was like, in the first year or so, like playtesting the game and just feeling a bit like bored, like always skipping the forums. And they just weren't, they didn't really work with the main story almost. Like you would meet Vivi on there and Zala and Marken, but generally there wasn't much need to be in there. So that was a bit of a problem. And then I decided like, oh, I need to just make them a bit more fun and have a bit more of the randomness of the internet. So some of the drawings became like memes and quite funny, like silly things. Other times there were people online that just weren't very nice, like trolls, and you could try and ban them. And all these things, you can start kind of shaping how Emmett's personality turns out. So if you ban a load of trolls, Emmett becomes like a bit nicer and a bit more lawful and a bit more, an upstanding citizen kind of character. But you could also like a nasty post. And if you do that, that also affects his character as well. So all of a sudden I could, if you interacted with the forums, it would change Emmett. And if you kept interacting in a positive or a negative way, the forums themselves would change. So if you're going to play it again, hopefully you'll see the forums like quite differently depending on how you're playing it. So it made like replaying it a bit more fun. And all of a sudden the forums felt like they mattered towards Emmett as well. I have seen like some people say like, oh, I really loved the forum stuff and I wish there was more of that and I wish we could talk more to people. But it was like the hardest part to add, I think. There's loads of characters in there. And if you imagine like befriending loads of them, like it's a lot of work for like a solo dev, really.
I'm one of those people who really liked it. So
oh, that's cool.
you might remember a comment from me at some point.
Yeah, it's something that like, I wish I could have fleshed them out even more and made them really, really cool. But it was something that I think I underestimated in my initial plan of just how much effort the forums were going to be. But I think it did make a nice balance of the main focus is still like Emmett and Vivi's relationship. But the forums now are at least quite fun to like hang out in and see who's there and just start up a random conversation with people. Yeah.
Yeah. But also you could argue that compared again to One Night Stand, Videoverse is a really bigger game. Like, if I remember correctly, because I played it like 4 years ago now, I don't even remember. One Night Stand took me to get all the endings to unlock the true ending. It took me like 3 hours, 2 hours, something like that, while Videoverse one playthrough took me 6.
Yeah.
So it's a really chunkier game. Did that amount of writing perhaps... what do you think about this amount of writing you did for Videoverse specifically compared to your earlier works?
Yeah, it was quite hard, I guess. But also like the word count. I think for One Night Stand is about 20,000 words, and for Videoverse was around, I think it's like 60 or 70. So it is big, but it's not like some visual novels are like hundreds of thousands. But it is harder when Videoverse isn't really a typical visual novel. It's not just like text box after text box. It's the forums, it's the direct messages, it's the real life stuff. Sometimes it's the advertisements. There's like a lot of text in different places in Videoverse. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but I think the size of the story, it felt quite natural, really. Like when I was writing it, it did grow more than I expected it to. I think originally I wanted the game to be like an hour or two of gameplay, and it ended up being somewhere between like 5 and 7 hours. Um, so yeah, it was a bit of a surprise, but I think it was also really nice to make something a little bit bigger that players could, enjoy over a weekend or something, rather than one night stands that some players would only play once for like 20 minutes. So yeah, it was nice to just give players a bit more, I think.
Um, if we look back to your games, and also I would argue the Memories game you teased, um, your writing and stories are really focusing in the human aspect of things, like human interactions in particular, it seems. What do you think is your take on storytelling? What are you trying to achieve through storytelling?
I think it's mostly empathy, I think, if I had to sum it up with one word. But specifically, storytelling in video games is usually quite, male dominated or masculine. Stories about like dads protecting their daughters or something. And I think there's a lot of stories from more female perspectives, or at least situations that maybe rely on a little bit more care or consideration for the people involved. So, One Night Stand isn't really, even though, it's a game about having sex and waking up the next day, it's not really a game for like the male gaze, for example. She's never like in super sexy poses or anything like that. It's very much like very awkward and real, and putting players in this uncomfortable, strange situation. Kind of It's kind of important, really, that I think there's a lot of media and games and even TV shows and things like are very unrealistic in some ways. In video games, there's a lot of like power fantasies, for example, the player being able to be as strong as, the strongest person, or be able to beat up whoever they want, or just like always winning. And I like to play with that and pull the rug out from like the player's like feet, really, and kind of remind them like, you're only human at the end of the day. And sometimes in these situations, even if it is just a video game character, like you should try and be nice to them, like, like they're real people. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
It does. And I find it a bit funny because I had a chat with a friend of mine some time ago, and we are discussing about RPGs and whether we replay the games, whether we make other choices, etc. And myself, I've finished, for example, Mass Effect 2 like 4 times, and all of the times are the same playthrough essentially, because. Yeah. And due to that chat, I realized, I have a power fantasy. I have power fantasy that I want to be nice to people. Yeah. I don't want to hurt them.
Yeah, I do the same with Mass Effect. I tried, a second Renegade route, and it's really hard. I couldn't do it.
Though I have to say, in Mass Effect, it might be a bit easier for me because it's I can see it as a, let's say, 80s action film and something like that, so I can play it a bit. But for example, the older BioWare games like Knights of the Old Republic, I have finished them so many times and I cannot, for the sake of myself, be a bad. I feel bad about being bad, let's say.
Yeah. And I remember like the end of One Night Stand, it kind of insinuates that you are bad.
I didn't want to spoil things, but yes.
It's an old game now, you know.
Yeah, 10 years. But since you brought it up, I would wait for the recording to stop before I chatted to you about this. But since you brought it up, that twist, I didn't see this coming. And the weird thing is that in order to get this, for the people who are listening to this and haven't played One Night Stand, you can replay the game many times and get different interactions, different endings. But if you unlock all of them, you are getting essentially not a true ending per se, but how things originally started.
Yeah.
What was the premise? And I remember me being nice to her, perhaps not specifically that we're gonna date or anything, but getting, okay, I connect with a human person. And then I got to the ending, the true premise. I was like, what the fuck? I don't deserve anything.
It's funny, but it comes from Gary, your friend, who I think is also a bit of a jerk. So, you know, do you trust what he says there? Question mark?
I'm not sure, but as a guy, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see the story checks out. Yeah, okay, I can see a drunk person being whatever because he feels down in their luck or wants to one-up his friend or something. But
exactly, yeah.
But that's again for me is peak writing, because if you got a twist that makes the viewer, the player feel something, and not just feel okay, whatever what this is, but you know, actually have an impact on the general storytelling and the trip up until there. Because again, you need to see all the endings, so you kind of have forced the actual player to commit to go through the good routes as well.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, I think I started perhaps with the generic route, like trying to play as I would act, whatever happens. Yeah. Then I tried to do first the bad stuff to get them out of the way. Then go to the good stuff, and then I saw this and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I had so much fun with One Night Stand, because it's a game that's not really anything like me, but I had so much fun. I was able to distance myself from it and just come up with these crazy situations and what people would say. Yeah, it was just a lot of fun.
After our chat here, I would pay you some good money to have the go out the window ending.
Yeah. Well, I could always add it. You never know.
One Night Stand 2. Or the hidden chapters or something like that.
2 Night Stand.
Yeah, I can see that title working. That's too good. Now I want it. Getting off a bit to the end of the podcast, you mentioned that in Videoverse you actually had some help by another programmer. What was, in your opinion, your experience with working more as part of the team? Because from checking the credits as well, I think you also had a specific composer as well.
Yes, that's right. So the people that there was quite a lot of people that contributed, but the people that spent the most time working with was Depeche, who's the programmer, and Clark, who was the composer for the soundtrack. So with One Night Stand, I kind of did a very minimalist soundtrack myself, but with Videoverse, I tried, and it was really, really difficult. I just couldn't get that kind of Nintendo Miiverse, like Mario Paint kind of sound that I really wanted, because I wanted it to sound like a real video game console, you know. So I was like, right, I'll hire a professional for this. Clark was someone I'd spoken to before about another unfinished project. But
I sense a pattern here.
yeah, I have a bad problem, but I think I just have too many ideas. But yeah, working with Clark was really nice. He worked on Kind Words and Slay the Spire. But I came across him with Kind Words, which is it's not really a game, but you write letters about just anything that's going on in your life, and people online will kind of respond, but it's anonymous. So there's this really nice, like lo-fi kind of music in the background, and it just works really well with evoking empathy, but also like it lets you read. Like it's not a really distracting like song or anything. And I was like, that's the kind of thing that I want for Videoverse, because I want it to be empathetic and kind, and also like a sound system. So yeah, so I worked with Clark and also working with Depeche, the programmer. That was a lot like longer involved because I kept adding things. Then we'd find bugs that from adding all this stuff. So it was a bit more like of an ongoing like for years like chatting in Discord, and he was great because he was pretty much always available. He was very passionate about the game and the project, and whenever I had doubts or concerns about anything, he'd usually find a solution to it. But it was my first time like working with a composer and a programmer. There were also other people involved, like there was the voice actors that you hear, like there's Mark who's like narrating the game, and then right at the end there's like other voice actors involved. But I don't want to spoil that too much. But yeah, like voice directing was something that I did for the first time as well. And Videoverse just had a bit more of a budget. And what was really surprising was like doing the voice acting and the directing. At least for me, like I thought it was going to be really difficult, but I had such a clear vision for the game that it was actually quite easy, and it was also very affordable. Like working with voice actors, it's really not as expensive as long as they can record like at home. It's very like achievable for an indie dev, and I really liked it. I thought it just adds a bit more energy and life to the game, and I think that really helped Videoverse in the end. So yeah, there was it was different because One Night Stand was like this little game jam that I just kind of did on my own. Videoverse was kind of the opposite, but at the end of the day, like it was only really me directing or like doing everything, like trying to tell people what I wanted, and there was no one else to fall back on who could, if I was unwell or something, could take over for me. So it was quite stressful as well, like bringing more people in because they kind of rely on you as well for feedback and stuff. But I think it made a really cool game, and I would really like to like make a game of that scale again at some point.
So closing, what's next for you? Videoverse, as you said, was more of a big, in air quotes, bigger budget game, more effort put into it, more collaboration. Is it something? Are you working on anything like bigger? Are you planning on perhaps going back to the simplicity and let's say more experimental version of an One Night Stand type of project? What's next for you?
It's more like the latter. So I haven't announced anything officially yet, but basically because we had the Videoverse console port, which only just came out a couple of months ago, and the Japanese localization, there was still quite a lot of Videoverse work going on for the last couple of years. So because of that, I knew like I can't really sink my teeth into a really big project. Like I have this itch to make an RPG Maker game at some point because I've always wanted to do it. But I don't, I knew like, oh, I'm going to have to do all this Videoverse stuff, and I'm going to be like almost on call for Videoverse for the next however long. So I was like, right, I have to make something just a bit smaller that I'm not going to be as upset if I have to drop like working on it for several weeks or whatever. So yeah, I was like, right, I need to make something smaller. So my next game is meant to be small, but it's actually a bit bigger than One Night Stand, I think, but not as big as Videoverse. And it's another like visual novel about kind of intimate topic about human nature, I guess. But I can share that I think it has some of like my nicest artwork that I've ever done. Like I'm really, really proud of the artwork. So yeah, I hope people like stay tuned for in the next like few months. I hope to announce it. But yeah.
For our listeners, this recording happens a couple of months before the actual release. So where can they find out and stay tuned with your news? Where can they follow you up?
The best place, because the internet's so scattered, I think the best place is my newsletter, which is on my website, which is kinmoku.games. And you can sign up to that. But I am also on Blue Sky, Mastodon, Instagram, TikTok. Just search for Kinmoku and you'll probably find me.
Oof, you're way more linked than me. I need to keep up. I barely even have a working Instagram.
Well, my Instagram is my smallest one. I don't know why. It's just I'm not very good with like Meta, like Facebook. I've given up on. So yeah,
I haven't for some reason, but yeah.
Yeah, I can't with Facebook anymore, and Twitter as well. Like Twitter's, I don't post on there anymore. But Blue Sky, I'm kind of regular on, so that's the second best place.
Okay, I will have links to everything on the released version, so everybody listening can click on the links and check up what's latest for Kinmoku. Thank you very much for joining us today, and see you everybody on the next podcast episode. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.